Do you want to hear some quotes that don't mean anything but also mean something? Well, I've got some for you, but they are also worthy of respect. They're from the Liverpool captain, Virgil van Dijk. And he is talking about the ongoing discussions over his new Liverpool deal. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this by now, but I wanted to get into the long-term to medium-term ramifications of what a lot of this actually means and possibly what some of us are missing. There's like one key, very pivotal element that I really just want to talk about. First of all, of course, the discussions are ongoing. Of course, he's not going to say, I am committed to staying to the club. And of course, he's not going to say, I'm committed to leaving the club, because you're just going to weaken your negotiation position with no matter who you're talking to at that time. I don't expect Virgil van Dijk to come out and just commit his future to the club until there is a contract he's happy with, or at least, everyone is happy with on the table. That is cool, right? But I'm just going to go through these quotes. Cool. It says ongoing here. Cool, that's absolutely fine. These are ongoing alongside Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mo Salah, a couple of other guys who've got long-term contracts being negotiated as well. There's the Konate types here. Quansah recently signed a deal, of course. It would have been unusual for Quansah to leave the club considering his situation, but you get my point. I can say discussions are ongoing, but I don't know what happens in the future. Cool, already confirmed what it is I'm saying. My very full focus on Liverpool, something I'm actually quite happy about hearing at this point. I think this is a really interesting, it's not insight, but it is a really interesting sentence. Wanting to win games that are ahead of me and nothing else. What the future will bring, I have no idea at the moment. I can only tell you that discussions are ongoing with the right people, and when it's time to make a decision or whatever, I think you guys, the media, will know it as well. Well, yeah, obviously you got to announce it, launch it at some point. But now full commitment and focus is on Liverpool and to be successful this season. So we will see. First of all, I think that the Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah situations are slightly different to the Trent Alexander-Arnold situation. I would imagine there'll be plenty of other clubs that would want Virg, Mo, and Trent. But what you can see is, and these guys are kind of now beginning to enter the twilight of their career, the two either side of Trent. They need to win something. They will obviously want to win something in these last few years. There is not a last dance type scenario here. I mean, obviously it feels very similar to that, but there is a last dance type feeling to it. They will not have much longer at the very top end, and they want to leave their imprint on a club where they probably see that there is a future of relative, if not increased success outside of what happened during their period. So when Klopp came in, I think a lot of people were talking about, well, Gerrard, it's difficult to eclipse him because he won the Champions League, because he did this, because he did that. Now, the retrospective on Gerrard feels very different when you look at captains like Virgil van Dijk and Henderson and even Trent and Milner and all these kind of people. People have done incredible things for the club. It doesn't make him any less of a player. It doesn't diminish what his achievements were in that time. But it does put into perspective the place and time that the club was in at that point. And it's very different to where we sit now. And what I'm saying by that is, I think these guys know there is a limited amount of time in your career and you have to win things within that time. And getting slot in is a legitimate chance to win things. Whether you have a limited amount of time or not, slot is a window within which you can win or at least challenge and therefore try to win those things, right? Champions League, Premier League, all these things. And he'll be telling those players these things. He'll probably, you can't go out of your way and go, I know you're going to leave, but whatever. The main thing here is I think a lot of the long-term discussions that we've been seeing are all about, if these guys go, however will we replace them? Of course, that's one thing on the pitch, but I think the culture that they bring outside of that, and you see what Virg brings on a daily basis. Of course, Slot has already spoken about that in training, speaking about how he sets an example, how he is training exceptionally, how he is above everyone else in terms of, the standards that he holds for himself. These are really important things. These are things that I think it's all well and good losing training staff, losing Klopp, losing these kind of things, right? Those guys are on another management level. The real interactions, or at least the day-to-day interactions, were obviously happening in groups, but very much happening between the players. It was very much Van Dijk, Henderson, the leaders of the team, two back-to-back captains there, Trent, and now obviously we see McAllister being brought into that leadership group. Being the leaders, being the people who set the example, but also being the people who set the culture, being the people that carry the culture from the manager to the other players. We were talking about how when Klopp leaves, that will leave a massive hole because, we took a similar model to the one that we saw after Sir Alex left. I think broadly, Slot has not tried to tinker all that much with the players' mentality because their mentality has been set at such a high level. But I think the more that you lose some of the key pillars of what is in your time at Liverpool, the more you begin to move away from that older mentality. Now, obviously, Liverpool could go out there and replace these guys with people who are equally leaders of the future. When Mo Salah came into the club, I think a lot of people were skeptical as to where it would go next. And, no one, I think, would have shown him as one of those guys who leads by example in the way that we've seen him lead by example, and in such a prolific way, right? The same goes for Trent. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be a really great talent when he first came out there. They thought he was going to be fantastic at right back, but they don't think of right backs as these like prolific type characters. And he was such a small kid still developing into his game at the time. I think people saw how good he was, they saw the high potential, but what did they really think he was going to be? And I think a lot of people, because he played right back, because they wanted to limit him to that side, characterised him as a limited player until the best came out of him under Klopp. And obviously under Klopp, there was an incredible amount of progression in his career. Similar goes for Van Dijk. I think Van Dijk was already prolific, but leadership qualities, all these kind of things, he was showing those at every other club. These are things that come with a generational player. These are things that come with being one of those characters that is not just going to, the streets will remember. No, everyone is remembering this guy. This guy is an all-timer. This guy is someone who, he's in the top 50 Premier League players of all time. He's probably the best centre-back of all time in the Premier League. Maybe not in trophies, but certainly in terms of some of the records that he holds, some of the great things that he's done in the game, the longevity of what it is that he's done, the way that other people have picked up off the back of him, possibly even the difficulty of being able to emulate him shows how great he is in the first place. It's about keeping that culture. And I don't think that Liverpool was purely a Klopp culture. I think Klopp was a lot more selfless than a lot of us think. The focus on one individual means we think, well, that individual must be the focus. Klopp had focused on building holistically good players, holistically smart, bonded players. And part of this article that I was reading goes on to speak about Curtis Jones and Van Dijk, and he's speaking about how he's become a father over this last couple of weeks, right? And how important that is to him, how it's been an amazing few weeks for Curtis. Knowing each other off the field, having this bonded group of people, which again, I think the players seem to have come closer in this slot time, is extremely important. And part of continuing this great culture, part of continuing the great legacy of Klopp, will be to continue the legacy of the human side of all of these players. That wasn't just Klopp, that was also Michael Edwards, that will probably be Richard Hughes as well in the very near future, and a lot of these people that buy into this holistic model. Doesn't mean get rid of those players or keep those players no matter what. There is not this binary thing. I think Liverpool will probably end up with 2 out of those 3 contracts signed. I get the feeling Trent's going to leave. I get the feeling we would prefer Salah to stay, though the way he's speaking, it looks maybe he might even leave. And I think Van Dijk is a contract worth keeping, not only for leadership skills, but also just for the transition out of one period into the next. And if you're going to lose Trent and you are going to lose Salah, I don't think you can afford to lose Virgil van Dijk in terms of key pillars that stand in the dressing room. It's really key. I don't think a lot of people are talking about this at the moment. They're talking about, the contract, the money, FSG, these kind of things. The core of it that we need to attack is the idea that we're going to lose some key pillars within the squad. It's not just about the influence on the field. It's about the 5, 10, 1% that they get out the rest of the people within the team, and the quality that they manage to extract from those guys because they are great themselves, because they go further. You don't just replace those figures in a team. I think a lot of other people have taken very high standards, but in order for those standards to stick, you need people who keep consistently high standards, consistently lead a very consistent life. People don't realize this about football. They think everyone's just going around, just all of them are these incredible inconsistent characters, just sleep with anyone and do anything they want. That's just not the case, not the way that it works. Of course, some of them have crazy lives, but the whole point of building a spine of a team is it's a spine. You can rely on it. You can go back to it at any one point and understand that's going to be my core. Virgil van Dijk, Trent, and Salah are 3 of those. This doesn't mean, I'm not meaning to say, if I think we don't keep any of them, it all falls apart. But I think what we are keeping is these core principles. And without these principles, it also makes it more difficult to relate to the team. It makes it more difficult to, find touch points in the side that you can support. I love the Brendan Rodgers era. I liked the Brendan Rodgers era. I didn't love it. But there were plenty of players in that team that I had no emotional connection to. And when I've been reading books about that time, when I've been looking back at the Liverpool modern era, I think of Iago Aspas, Luis Alberto, Christian Benteke, even Mario Balotelli. These are all guys that I'm sure have gone on to good things at other clubs, but they've not gone on to anything prolific for Liverpool, and I certainly don't hold any emotion for them. Van Dijk, I mean, I'm not saying that I feel like I'm friends with Van Dijk in any different way to the way that I'm with any other player, but I certainly have an emotional bond with these kind of people. It's probably a one-way scenario, but I have an emotional bond with these kind of people where I feel that they've done something which has significantly entertained me and made me better, feel better in my life. That kind of thing is important, I think, in terms of maintaining fan bases, in terms of growing the global brand, having recognizable people in your team who other people are also scared of. The aura of Salah was so important against Chelsea. The aura of Van Dijk was so important against Chelsea. Weirdly, a lot of shots came from that side, but that's a whole other video. The aura of Trent and the implications of what it is that he does out on the field changed the way the opposition play him. When they see him sitting back and they know he's going to try and do a defensive job, they play him differently. And just talking about being a right back, being a left back, being a centre back, or whatever it is not good enough when analysing these literal greats of the game that are in this Liverpool side week in, week out. That's not to say there won't be other greats. Since Arne Slot has come in, he's improved Gravenberch to a great degree. He's made him play great in those games. Does it mean he's a great leader? I don't know. We're about to find out that in this season, in the coming seasons, hopefully. The same with Curtis Jones. I think Curtis Jones was already on a great track under Klopp, towards the end of the Klopp era especially. There are some doubts in the middle of it, but certainly towards the end of it. And under the Slot period that he's had here, he's continued to evolve, should we say. I don't think it's a cut-off point and then they restart. He's a human. He's been having a kid over the last 9 months, and so the point is, in order to continue these things, you need to continue that culture of greatness which has been fostered and nurtured during this period under Klopp, but also under Edwards, but also under FSG. And it's key to bridging that gap financially if FSG are not going to spend the money exorbitantly on other transfers. So I think it's just one thing we need to acknowledge. When we're discussing these contracts, it's really important to remember the holistic side of them and not just the money that's on the table, and probably why spending that money will actually look much more expedient in the long term than just going out there and buying someone new who can then step into that position. Especially if some of those people, maybe similar to the situation that Arsenal find themselves in now, get into the ire of someone like Real Madrid, get into the ire of someone like Barcelona or someone else where people really want to play. Virgil van Dijk was at his peak at Liverpool and stayed. There was never even a question as to whether Virgil van Dijk was going to leave. Mo Salah, I think he entertained the Saudis at some point, but I think outside of that, maybe PSG were entertained as well. I think has remained loyal to Liverpool. There are obviously discussions around contract and stuff, but I never really felt like he was going to leave the club. The same goes for other people within the team, like Alisson. He's come out and pledged his future, his allegiance to the club. That's really important, I think, in terms of culture, in terms of attracting other people and saying, do I like this? You might like this too. I'm going to stay here. You might stay here too. These small financial and mental hurdles are incredibly important in the long term of the club. And I think the club know that. But more than that, I think people like Virgil van Dijk know that. And it's real credit to him and the team that they're giving interviews in these times, trying to build on the positivity that's currently surrounding the club. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think it's a really insightful interview. It's out there on The Guardian. It's out there on multiple different news sources, but I read it on The Guardian. If you guys are interested in hearing more about this stuff, then hit the subscribe button below. And of course, there is a Patreon down there for my work. I appreciate you, and I'll chat to you in a while. Much love. Bye.